Hello everyone, I am Deepak Ji, Assistant Professor of Commerce. Today, in this session, we are discussing regarding the valuation of unsold stock in consignment accounts. When the goods which are consigned by the consigner to the consignee and with the goods which is not sold at the end of an accounting year, that is, that the goods lying in the hands of the consignee at the end of an accounting year, that has to be valued before we closing the books of account at that particular accounting year. So while valuation of unsold stock, we have to consider certain expenses. Those expenses we call it as a recurring expenses and non-recurring expenses. Because while valuation of closing stock, recurring expenses and non-recurring expenses, especially non-recurring expenses, is most important in the valuation of unsold stock. What is non-recurring expense? What are the examples of non-recurring expense? Non-recurring expenses, which is also called as a direct expenses. All the expenses which are incurred till the goods reaches the premises of the consignee and the expenses incurred to bring the goods in a saleable condition are treated as a direct expenses or non-recurring expenses. ಅಂದ್ರೆ what consigner consigned the goods to the consignee till the goods reaches to the premises of the consignee ಗೋಡೌನ್ ಅಥವಾ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ ಶಾಪ್ ಅಥವಾ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ ಪ್ರಿಮಿಸಸ್ ವರೆಗೂ ರೀಚ್ ಆಗೋವರೆಗೂ what are all the expenses the consigner will incur, all those expenses are called as non-recurring expenses. All the expenses which are incurred till the goods reaches to the premises of the consignee and the expenses incurred to bring the goods in a saleable condition. ಆ ಪ್ರಾಡಕ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಸೇಲಬಲ್ ಕಂಡೀಷನ್ ಬರೋವರೆಗೂ ಏನೇನೆಲ್ಲ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೋ ಆಲ್ ದೋಸ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಆರ್ ನಾನ್ ರಿಕರಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಆರ್ ಡೈರೆಕ್ಟ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್. These expenses incurred on the whole consignment only once, which is not incurred again and again. ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಎಂಟೈರ್ ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಗ್ತಕ್ಕ ಒಂದು ಸಲ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ನಾವು ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ದಟ್ ವಿಲ್ ಬಿ ಇನ್ಕರ್ಡ್ ಓನ್ಲಿ ಒನ್ಸ್, that not be incurred again and again. That's why these are all the expenses which is called as direct expenses. Then what are the examples of non-recurring expenses? These non-recurring expenses are incurred by both consigner and consignee. Consigner will incur non-recurring expenses. Say examples: packing charges, loading charges, carriage, freight, octroi, insurance in transit, dock dues, forwarding charges. These are all the expenses that these non-recurring expenses incurred by the consigner while consigning the goods. Packing charges, loading charges, carriage, freight, octroi, insurance in transit, dock dues, forwarding charges. And the consignee will also incur some of those non-recurring expenses. Say import duty or custom duty, dock dues, unloading charges, octroi, railway charges, cartage or carriage for taking the goods to the his business premises, and even freight to go down or shop, fitting and assembly cost, conversion cost. These are all the non-recurring expenses which are incurred only once on whole consignment by both the consigner and consignee. These expenses and examples are more important in valuation of closing stock. And again, as non-recurring expenses are there is also recurring expenses. Recurring expenses are those expenses which are incurred by the consignor and the consignee which do not increase the value of goods. Which do not increase the value of goods, but these expenses are incurred again and again. What are the examples ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ, these recurring expenses, the name itself suggests, which has incurred again and again, which do not increase the value of goods, just but we are incurring. Why? For the promotion, for the sale of a product. ಏನೇನು ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ? ರೆಕರಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ಕನ್ಸೈನರ್ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ, ಸಿ ಡಿಸ್ಕೌಂಟ್ ಚಾರ್ಜಸ್ ಇನ್ಕರ್ಡ್ ಫಾರ್ ಡಿಸ್ಕೌಂಟಿಂಗ್ ಬಿಲ್ ಆಫ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಚೇಂಜ್ ರಿಸೀವ್ಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ದ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ. In consignment transactions, advance payment made by the consignee in the form of bill of exchange that has been discounted by the consignor, that has been incurred again and again. Bank charges incurred for realization of bill of exchange, checks, and draft received from the consignee. Again, what are the checks, draft, bill of exchange received from the consignee? The consignor incur bank charges for the realization of those instruments. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ಅದು ಕೂಡ ರೆಕರಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. And expenses incurred on the goods returned by the consignee. Sometimes the consignee will return the goods. When the consignee return back the goods, the consignor will receive the goods to his premises until he will incur certain expenses. All those expenses incurred when the goods returned by the consignee or recurring expense, and bad debts to be borne by the consignor. If bad debts, if it is borne by the consignor, it is also a recurring expense of the consignor. So, consignor recurring expenses are discount charges and bank charges for bill of exchange received from the consignee, and the checks and draft realization, and expenses incurred when the goods returned by the consignee, and bad debts. What are the recurring expenses of the consignee? Consignee recurring expenses which is incurred again and again. Go down rent, go down insurance, and office and administration expenses, advertisement, commission, brokerage, salesman's salary, establishment charges, expenses incurred on damaged goods, expenses on goods returned. All these expenses are recurring expense of the consignee which is incurred again and again. So, after knowing all recurring and non-recurring expense of the consignor and consignee, we move on to the problem regarding the valuation of closing stock. Shashida consigned 50,000 units costing rupees 5 each to Bhaskar. Shashidhar incurred rupees 10,000 for sending the goods. ಅಂದರೆ ಶಶಿಧರ್ 50,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಿದ್ದಾರೆ ಭಾಸ್ಕರ್. ಹೂ ಇಸ್ ಶಶಿಧರ್? ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ಶಶಿಧರ್, ಸೊ ಇಸ್ ಎ ಕನ್ಸೈನರ್. ಭಾಸ್ಕರ್ಗೆ ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಾರೆ, therefore ಭಾಸ್ಕರ್ ಇಸ್ ಎ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ. And Shashidhar incurred rupees 10,000 for sending the goods. ಶಶಿಧರ್ 10,000 rupees ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ನ ಸೆಂಡ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ. So until the goods reaches to the premise of the consignee, all those expenses are non-recurring expense. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ what Shashidhar incur rupees 10,000 for sending the goods is a non-recurring expense. It's most important. And rupees 2,500 units were abnormally destroyed in transit. 2,500 units destroy ಆಗಿದೆ during the transit in the process of sending of goods to the consignee that were accidentally destroyed. It is an abnormal loss ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ಬೋದು. And then Bhaskar took delivery. Remaining units na Bhaskar delivery ತಗೊಂತಾರೆ, who is a consignee, and paid 1,500 for bringing the goods to the godown. 1,500 ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ ಗೋಡೌನ್ಗೆ, ಅಂದರೆ ಆತನ ಪ್ರಿಮಿಸಸ್ಗೆ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ರೀಚ್ ಆಗೋದಕ್ಕೆ he will pay 1,500. Consignee sold 30,000 units at rupees 10 each, and consignee paid selling expense of rupees 10,000. Calculate the valuation of closing stock. So ಇಲ್ಲಿ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಯೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ಲೋಸಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ you have to consider just the non-recurring expense of consignor and consignee both. Non-recurring expense of consignor and consignee you have to consider while valuation of closing stock. ಇಲ್ಲಿ non-recurring expense of consignor ಯಾವುದು? ಶಶಿಧರ್ 10,000 rupees for sending the goods. Consignee ಇದು ಯಾವುದು? ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿಂಗ್ ಪಾಯಿಂಟ್ ಗಮನಿಸಿ, ಭಾಸ್ಕರ್ took delivery and paid 1,500 for bringing the goods to the godown. And consignee paid selling expense of 10,000. Selling expenses which is incurred again and again, therefore it is a recurring expense. For bringing the goods to the godown of the consignee, it is a non-recurring expense. ಯಾಕಂದರೆ ಒಂದ್ಸರಿ ಗೂಡ್ಸ್ ಪ್ರಿಮಿಸ್ ರೀಚ್ ಆದ್ಮೇಲೆ ಪದೇ ಪದೇ ತರೋ ಅವಶ್ಯಕತೆ ಇರೋದಿಲ್ಲ. ದೇರ್ಫೋರ್ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿದು ನಾನ್ ರೆಕರಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸ್ ಒನ್ ಐಟಮ್ ಇದೆ 1,500. Shashida, he is also 10,000 for sending the goods non-recurring expense. In a selling expense consign income ಮಾಡಿರೋದು, it is recurring expense which is not considered for the valuation of closing stock. So you have to calculate the valuation of closing stock. ಎಷ್ಟಿದೆ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಆಫ್ ಆಲ್ ನೋಡಿ, ಶಶಿದ ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ಡ್ 50,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್, 50,000 ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. 2,500 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಅಬ್ನಾರ್ಮಲಿ ಡೆಸ್ಟ್ರಾಯ್ ಆಗಿದೆಯಂತೆ. ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಇಸ್ ಸೋಲ್ಡ್ 30,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಅಂತೆ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ 50,000ಅಲ್ಲಿ 30,000 ರುಪಿ ಯೂನಿಟ್ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರು, 20,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಉಳ್ಕೊಂಡಿದೆ. 2,500 ಅಬ್ನಾರ್ಮಲಿ ಲಾಸ್ಟ್ ಅಂತೆ. ಹಾಗೆ ಉಳಿದಿದ್ದು 17,500 ಈಸ್ ದ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ವಿಚ್ ಈಸ್ ಇನ್ ದ ಹ್ಯಾಂಡ್ಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಆ 17,500 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಏನಿದೆ, ಫಾರ್ ದಟ್ ವಿ ಹ್ಯಾವ್ ಟು ಮೇಕ್ ದ ವ್ಯಾಲ್ಯೂಯೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ಕ್ಲೋಸಿಂಗ್ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್. ಹೇಗೆ? C. A solution: calculation of valuation of unsold stock. Valuation of unsold stock calculate ಮಾಡಬೇಕಾದ್ರೆ just we have to consider proportionate non-recurring expenses of both consignor and consignee. That's it. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ here first of all you have to consider cost price of consignment stock. What is the stock with left with the consignee is 17,500 units. Per unit is 5. As we have seen in the problem, Shashidhar consigned goods 50,000 units at rupees 5 per unit. So 1 unit ಗೆ 5 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಆಗುತ್ತೆ. ನಮ್ಮ ಹತ್ರ 17,500 ಯೂನಿಟ್ ಸ್ಟಾಕ್ ಇದೆ. Therefore 17,500 into 5, 87,500 ಆಯಿತು. For that you have to add proportionate non-recurring expenses incurred by consignor and consignee. Consignor non-recurring expense ನಾವು ಆಲ್ರೆಡಿ ಡಿಸ್ಕಷನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ವಿ, 10,000. ಶಿಶುದ incurred 10,000 for sending the goods, 10,000 rupees for whole consignment. Shashidhar consigned 50,000 units at rupees 5 per unit and incurred 50,000, that is 10,000 rupees for sending the goods. ಅಂದರೆ 50,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ನ ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡೋದಕ್ಕೆ 10,000 ರೂಪಾಯಿ ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಯಿತು. ನಮಗೆ ಬೇಕಾದ ಪ್ರಪೋರ್ಷನೇಟ್ ನಾನ್ ರೆಕರಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್. ಪ್ರಪೋರ್ಷನೇಟ್ ನಾನ್ ರೆಕರಿಂಗ್ ಎಕ್ಸ್ಪೆನ್ಸಸ್ ಅಂತ ಬಂದಾಗ 10,000 rupees have incurred for whole 50,000 units. What the stock left with us is 17,500. Therefore, calculation is 10,000 rupees into 17,500 units stock divided by 50,000. 50,000 units for the whole consignment. 17,500 units is the stock left with us. Therefore, 3,500 rupees ಆಯಿತು. And proportionate non-recurring expenses incurred by the consignee 1,500 rupees incur ಆಗಿದೆ to bring the goods to the premises or the godown of the consignee. Again 17,500 is the stock left with us divided by 47,500 ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ. ಯಾಕೆ 47,500 ಬಂತು? ಬಿಕಾಸ್ 50,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಶಶಿಧರ್ ಕನ್ಸೈನ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದು, 30,000 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ ಸೇಲ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾನೆ. 2,500 units is the loss that was destroyed during the transit. During the transit, 2,500 units were destroyed. ಹಾಗಾದರೆ ಕನ್ಸೈನಿ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ 47,500 units. He is not received whole 50,000 units. Consignee received only 47,500 units ಮಾತ್ರ ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾನೆ. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಾವಿಲ್ಲಿ 47,500 ಯೂನಿಟ್ಸ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ಹಾಕೊಂಡಿದ್ವಿ, ನಾಟ್ 50,000. ಫಾರ್ ದ ಕನ್ಸೈನರ್ he consigned whole 50,000 units. For consignee receives only 47,500 units only because 2,500 was lost. ಹಾಗಾಗಿ 47,500 ರಿಸೀವ್ ಮಾಡಿದ, 1,500 ರೂಪೀಸ್ ಇನ್ಕರ್ ಆಗಿದೆ. Now the stock is 17,500. When we calculate it, it comes around 553 rupees. Here, cost price of consignment stock 87,500. Add proportionate non-recurring expenses incurred by consignor 3,500. Only proportionate, not whole, because stock left with us is 17,500 units, and proportionate non-recurring expenses incurred by the consignee 553. Therefore, when you add all these three put together, valuation of unsold stock or closing stock is 91,533. So this is how we will calculate the unsold stock valuation. Agare, here in this session we discuss about the recurring and non-recurring expenses because it is more important in the valuation of unsold stock and a problem on valuation of unsold stock. And these are all the references book. Thank you.